God came down and planted a garden on a plot of land. It was lush and full of trees. A river watered the garden. This was the mountain of God. God walked there with Adam and Eve. Adam was placed there as king and priest and was commanded to tend and watch. He needed help in this venture of tending and watching, so God put him into a deep sleep. Eve was created as a helper suitable for him, and the flesh of Adam was covered up. In the middle of the garden was a test of obedience, a tree whose fruit, if eaten, would surely bring death.
As Jesus and his disciples crossed the brook Kidron in the evening of that fateful day, they entered a garden full of trees with an olive press, and pressing it was. The weight of death pressed down on the gardener, as could be seen from the sweat of his brow and the agony of his prayer. The disciples were commanded to pray, tend, and watch. However, they kept falling into a deep sleep. The flesh was weak. They desperately needed the helper and a fresh breath from God to watch and not fall into temptation.
The serpent was quite cunning. He came to deceive and betray. Adam and Eve were to keep watch, lest they fall. He said, "Has God really said, 'You shall not eat of any tree of the garden'? You will not surely die." She saw, delighted, and desired. They ate and died. They were afraid, ashamed, and naked. God entered the garden in the cool of the day. They heard his footsteps and hid from his presence among the trees. God came seeking them and saying, "Where are you?"
Judas, one of Jesus' disciples, was a very shrewd man. He knew that if Jesus were the Messiah, he would not surely die. Judas came with a large group in the cool of the evening, seeking Jesus, eager to betray him. They went to the garden because that's often where Jesus would go. The entrance to the garden became filled with flaming torches and flashing swords, but Jesus didn't hide among the trees. He freely and openly greeted those who sought him. He said, "Whom do you seek?" They said, "Jesus, the Nazarene." When Jesus said, "I am," they all fell back to the dust of the ground. The deceiver betrayed him with a kiss, and Peter, who had said he would surely die with Jesus, wasn't so sleepy anymore. Seeking to help Jesus, he began to fight against flesh and blood. The master turned to Peter and rebuked him. The disciples, who had left father and mother to be one with their Lord, were afraid and ashamed. One, stripped of his covering, ran away naked. They all fled the garden and the presence of the Lord and went into hiding.
God turned to the serpent and cursed him, saying, "The woman's seed will bruise your head. You will bruise his heel, but you will be brought down to eat the dust of the ground." Adam was bound in the chains of his sins, judged, and driven out of the garden to face the sentence of death. To dust you shall return. The entrance of the garden glowed with the flaming sword. Adam's sin entered the world, and death spread to all because all sinned.
Jesus was arrested, bound, and driven out of the garden to face judgment and the sentence of death. After Jesus was condemned, Judas felt remorse. Hoping to ease his conscience, he tried to return the silver, the price of a slave. When the chief priest refused it, He threw it at their feet and went off and hanged himself on a tree. The Jewish authorities, not wanting a corpse in the city, threw him headlong into the field purchased with the blood money. The fall to the dust of the ground burst him open. Jesus carried the burdensome wood on his back. He was carrying more than that, for the weight of the curse was upon him, and the crown of the cursed ground was upon his head. Our King and our priest. He was led to a tree, the test of obedience. He was hung upon the rugged frame, naked. What a strange, cruel, and magnificent throne the enemy had constructed. It was near the crushed skull of Goliath of Gath. Golgotha, a friendly reminder that the Lord never loses. The weight of the curse, the world's sin and pain were upon Jesus. Our exiled King was broken, and to the dust of death he went. Caiaphas wisely said, "We need one man to die on behalf of all." And Pilate wisely proclaimed, "Behold, the Adam." As Jesus died, darkness filled the land, and the blood, his blood that soaked the ground, seemingly spoke to many of a failed Messiah. But to ears that could hear, it was articulating faithfulness to the promises and redemption. A Roman soldier cried out, "Surely this was the Son of God." Jesus' friends took him down from the tree of death, which became the tree of life. They held on to his lifeless body, entered a nearby garden, and placed the seed in an earthen tomb.
With no one to tend the ground, God's presence left. The garden withered, and thorns infested the ground. The pain of death struck when Adam's son, Abel, was killed. His parents held his lifeless body. Darkness and confusion filled the land. Eve wept, but it was too late. The tree of life was now inaccessible. Abel's blood cried out from the ground as Cain was driven out from the land. However, God was not absent.
While the tomb was silent, there was a cosmic shift. The rocks of the old creation began to break up, and you could hear the crushing of the serpent's skull. Jesus burst forth into new creation life. The door to a new Eden was flung wide open as Jesus walked out of the tomb. Death was swallowed up in victory. The daughter of Eve wept, wondering where they had placed her Lord. She saw the second Adam, Adam par excellence, and rightly mistook him for the gardener. With one word, in an instant, she recognized the risen Lord and held on to renewed humanity. She was the first to plant the seed of the news that would spread, take root, and bear fruit throughout the land. Our resurrected Gardner undid the pain of sin and death.
His followers will be transformed and raised from the dust of the ground. Let his glory fill the earth and renew all who hear. He is the way to the new heavens and new earth, filled with his presence. A new garden with the tree of life bearing fruit, well watered by the river of life. There will be no hiding, no shame, nakedness, pain, or tears. No more curse, and no more death.